Week 1 is in the books. Was I wrong about Mac Jones, Brock Purdy, and Jordan Love all this time? Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive powered by Market Movers. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and the NFL season is finally upon us. It's here. Superstar performances, crazy upsets, upsetting injuries, and NFL memes to tie it all together with a bow. I want to overreact to Week 1 and take a look back at some of the players I identified in July as possible speculative plays. As always, this video is brought to you by Market Movers. Visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code DIVE when you check out to get 14 days free and then 20% off for life as long as you're subscribed. Now let's get into the data. All right, so back in mid-July, I recorded a video kind of walking through a huge list of NFL players and where I felt their prices were relative to their previous performance, as well as their potential performance this season. And I identified 5 guys who I thought had upside. And the first person that I identified was Jalen Hurts. Not the best Week 1, but the Eagles did win that game, and it's always tough to play at Foxborough Stadium, Gillette Stadium. Hurts was 22 for 33 for 170 yards with 1 touchdown, no turnovers, and 37 yards rushing. Kind of a pedestrian performance for him. Now, if we go back and look at his Prism Silver, just as an example, this is obviously the card that I like to refer to a lot as a staple card, not necessarily always the best speculative play, but this was his PSA 10. We go back, and the last sale at the time that I had recorded that was actually back in June. I think I recorded the video on July 12th. This card had sold previously in the middle of June for $840. Obviously, you see a little bit of a run-up, and then that card most recently has come back down slightly above that to $887. So obviously there was some opportunity this summer on Hurts, a little bit of run-up in his card prices. I did buy one of his Prism Silver PSA 9s as well as an Optic Hollow PSA 9. I'm holding both of those. I'm still optimistic about Hurts this season and hoping that he has a chance to go up a little bit more. So switching gears to the next player, Jared Goff. Jared Goff, obviously, the Lions had a massive upset at Arrowhead last week. This was a very exciting and kind of conflicting game for me, but I was rooting for the Lions. They're my team for my entire life, and it's really exciting to see them get that win. The legend of Dan Campbell continues to grow, and Goff, who was far from perfect, did, however, look like he is more confident than I've really ever seen him. I had concerns. Last year, the Lions were playing sort of as underdogs. He could play with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, especially in that second half when they really had nothing to lose, having lost many of their games to start the season. This year, it's a totally different story, and you can tell that Campbell has that whole team, Goff included, believing. So Goff was 22 for 35 with 1 touchdown and no turnovers. Now, if Marvin Jones Jr. hadn't had 2 drops and a fumble in the red zone, it could have been a lot better. Goff now has 359 consecutive passes without an interception, which is the 3rd most all time. He's only behind Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. And if he goes 2 more games without an interception, he'll break that record. So if we jump back and look at his cards from the time that I recorded that video again, you can see it's overall just been a constant upward trajectory for Goff here. Obviously, upsetting the Chiefs at Arrowhead is going to be huge for that. Remains to be seen what the Lions will do this year. I always say it. I always expect the Lions to just kind of fall apart and disappoint when you think they should get the win. Hopefully this year will buck that trend. I'm rooting for them, and I'm rooting for Goff. The third person that I identified was Jalen Waddle. Now, obviously, it was the Tyreek Hill show in Week 1 with Waddle, but a solid week nonetheless for Waddle as well. 4 receptions, 78 yards, and, there's weapons on both sides of the ball. I wouldn't be surprised this season to see Hill have big weeks, Waddle have big weeks, maybe in some cases both of them. They spread the wealth, but we've seen that sort of dynamic with other strong wide receiver duos. One of the groups that comes to mind for me is like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. If you ever play fantasy, it seems like it's one or the other every week, 2 touchdowns, no touchdowns. So we'll see what happens with Waddle this season. But he was one of the guys that I kind of identified as having a lot of potential and a lot of upside and maybe being undervalued at the time. A lot of that had to do with the fact that his PSA 10 Prism Silver had sold the last at just $44. Now, it did shoot up almost immediately at the time of recording that video. In fact, the day after I recorded that video, the same card sold for $103. So obviously that was a bit of a fluke low sale on that $44. And you can kind of see this card has been down a little bit, flat over the last month or so. Really interesting to see what's going to happen with Waddle. I actually just bought one of his, like the green Pulsar prisms. They're not numbered in football. Really sharp looking card with that Dolphins jersey. We'll see what happens this season with Jalen Waddle. So for picks 4 and 5 this summer, I made some disclaimers that they were more gambles and about floor versus ceiling in their prices seemed really low and that they might have more upside than downside. And the first player I identified there was Kenneth Walker, the running back for the Seahawks. Seattle was, to my surprise, absolutely annihilated by the Rams in week 1. Walker only got 12 carries, but it was an efficient 12 carries at 5.3 yards per carry for a total of 64 yards. They were playing from behind, so obviously handing the ball off typically isn't going to do much. I identified his PSA 10 Prism Silver at $44 earlier this summer. That card has not sold since then. I mentioned in that video that because it was low pop, might be hard to find a copy of that. His PSA 9 Prism Silver, also really low pop at 28. Really hasn't, done a lot in terms of number of sales, but it is down a little bit. Saw a big dip this summer. That card actually sold for a measly $12. I wish I'd seen that and I would have scooped it up. Most recently having sold for 17 bucks about a month ago in mid-August. So we'll see what happens with Walker this season. Again, it's all about floor versus ceiling. Where can a card go? Down versus up. You can see that when I recorded this video, the PSA 9s were at $20. So losing $8 versus the potential that this thing could go up to 40 or 50 if he has a great season, maybe more than that. Those are the types of things that I like to look at in those lower dollar ranges. The 5th pick, don't laugh, or maybe do, depending on your sense of humor, was Kadarius Toney. Now my 2 favorite teams, like they squared off. The Lions had Marvin Jones Jr.'s blunders, like I mentioned, but those were completely overshadowed by Toney's, who had arguably one of the worst games in history by a wide receiver. Now with all that being said, personally, I expect a bounce back from Toney. I don't necessarily expect him to light the world on fire this season, but he continues to be an explosive weapon, and he was open many times. He just didn't catch the ball. Patrick Mahomes already reiterated his trust to the media, and I'm sure he's done the same thing to Toney. So if we jump over and we look at his card, believe it or not a lot of sales on this card. Pop 22 on the PSA 10, but when I recorded that video, that was at a $55 price point just a few weeks prior to the recording. That card spiked up to $81 this summer. There is one now for sale on eBay for 50 bucks or best offer. I might make a play on that card. Haven't made up my mind yet. We'll see. I kind of believe that Toney still has something in him. Maybe that's completely naive and I'm deceiving myself as a Chiefs fan. Remains to be seen. One thing I know for sure, I couldn't care less that he's a Florida Gator. Now, one final and 6th player who I briefly mentioned in that video was Calvin Ridley. He had a fantastic week 1 with 8 receptions for 101 yards and a touchdown and was very clearly Trevor Lawrence's favorite target. Obviously, he hasn't missed a beat since being out of the league for a good chunk of time now. So we'll see what happens with Ridley this season. Now, I want to shift over. I'm going to go kind of rapid fire, go through that whole slate of games. I really want to kind of look at, overreact. I'll show you some charts. I'm going to talk while I switch over to the charts and show you the cards for your analysis of what's happened over the last 30 days to these different players. All right, so starting out in week 1, I'm going to skip over Thursday Night Football. Already kind of touched on that. Let's go to Falcons versus Panthers. And look, all of us internally gave Jeff plenty of raised eyebrows and skeptical remarks when he went in big on Desmond Ridder this summer. What some people seem to have forgotten is that Jeff very clearly said numerous times that it was a big gamble and that he thinks the upside outweighs the downside. Now, if Ridder breaks out, the card could more than double. If he doesn't, yikes. People were laughing when Ridder had like 24 yards passing at the half. He did finish with a respectable line, 15 for 18 passing, only 115 yards and a touchdown, but no turnovers. The Falcons had incredible success in that game running the ball for a 5-yard average and a total of 130 yards, and they controlled the pace and won by 14. So they were ahead the whole game. They didn't really have a reason to let Ridder, kind of cut loose. Bijan Robinson looked amazing in somewhat limited touches relative to Tyler Algier. He had that awesome move for a touchdown. And because the Falcons were having so much success with Algier, they had to lead in the entire time. There was no need to overwork Bijan and potentially risk injury. They kind of let him settle into the offense. Drake London, of note, had just 1 target and no catches. It's kind of funny. There's this big billboard when I'm driving into work every day that says, "Drake is ready, are you?" We'll see how he does the rest of the season, and we'll see how they do against real competition in week 3 versus the Detroit Lions. Bryce Young looked young, raw, not a great start. He has a lot of games to improve, so we'll see what happens. As you can see, a little snapshot of some of those guys and what they're doing over the last 30 days. Browns-Bengals, maybe the surprise of the week for me, tied with the Rams blowing out the Seahawks. I wasn't shocked that the Browns won, but 24-3, Joe Burrow gets his payday and then throws for just 82 yards. Ouch. Nick Chubb proving that he is still a beast and will be forever underappreciated in the hobby because, well, he plays for the Browns. All right, let's shift gears to Jags-Colts. Solid week from Trevor Lawrence. Very good opening game, I would say. Solid week as well, like I said, for Calvin Ridley and for Travis Etienne. Also, surprisingly to me, a really solid debut for Anthony Richardson. Overall, not a ton of notables from that game, so we'll keep moving. All right, Bucs-Vikings. If I told you Kirk Cousins had 344 yards passing, Justin Jefferson 9 catches for 150 yards, and that Baker Mayfield had just 173 yards passing with the Bucs leading rusher at just 39 yards, you would think that the Vikings won that game running away. Well, that obviously wasn't the case. Mike Evans had 6 catches for 66 yards, yikes, as well as a touchdown. And we're kind of wondering now, is Baker Mayfield making a comeback? Probably not. I wouldn't say so. Titans-Saints. Boring. Ryan Tannehill was atrocious with 3 interceptions. The Titans have got to be wondering what to do with him. The Saints, 3 wide receivers of Olave, Shaheed, and Thomas actually looked really strong. My guy Jamal Williams struggled to find a hole to run through, and D-Hop solid with 7 catches and 65 yards. Not really going to move the needle for his sports card prices, though. Niners-Steelers, would have thought this would be a beatdown of the week until Sunday Night Football. The Niners dominated both sides of the ball. Their defense is absolutely terrifying. Brock Purdy, well, he sent me a custom telegram to tell me to keep my name out of his mouth after my skepticism this summer. And Brandon Ayuk was the star with 8 catches, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's the type of performance in week 1 that can definitely move the needle on card prices for a player. Now we'll jump over to look at the Cardinals and Commanders. If you're a Commanders fan, you're probably not feeling great about eking by with a 4-point win against the Cardinals, who many are saying might be one of the worst teams in history when this season is done. The Commanders have weapons. The big question is, can Sam Howell get them the ball? Texans versus Ravens. CJ Stroud threw many times with no scoring to speak of. Lamar Jackson pretty much stunk. And man, J.K. Dobbins, poor J.K. Dobbins, an Achilles he's done for the season. That's so rough for the Ravens fans, but I'm not sorry, Ohio State fans. Packers, Bears, let's jump over again back to the NFC North, that division that I'm always keeping my eye on. The Bears, well, they're who we thought they were, and that's why the Packers took the win. It was a close game at the half, and then Jordan Love and the Packers defense took over. Love shocked me with 3 touchdowns and 0 turnovers on the road in Chicago, and definitely not a great opening performance for Justin Fields, nor for his card investors and speculators. His shiny new weapon, DJ Moore, had just 2 catches for 25 yards. Not a great opening game for anything about the Bears. Raiders-Broncos, Russell Wilson honestly looked a lot better than he did most of last year. He spread the ball around, but ultimately 177 yards passing is not going to get it done. And Jimmy G, another guy I have critiqued heavily in the past, on the other hand, 20 for 26 with 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. An off-season acquisition, Jacoby Myers, 9 catches, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns. My fantasy team thanks you, sir. Let's go Eagles-Patriots. Much closer than I anticipated, and Mac Jones almost made me eat crow. He was 35 for 54 passing attempts for 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. The only problem was that the 1 turnover was a pick 6, which former Detroit Lions great Darius Slay took to the house. Jalen Hurts, as I said before, wasn't great, but they won the game. My big question, why did DeAndre Swift not get more touches? That guy is a weapon. He is electrifying. He's awesome. He had awesome preseason moves. Put him in the game, please. My fantasy team needs that. Okay, let's shift gears again to another electrifying game, the Chargers and the Dolphins. Tua with 466 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 215 of those yards to Tyreek Hill on 11 receptions. The Dolphins' offense looks just as electric and terrifying as last year before Tua's injury. Please, please let him stay healthy for football fans' sake. Herbert was solid, but it was all about the run game in this game for the Chargers with 234 yards total, split up pretty evenly between Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly. Sunday Night Football, man, what a beatdown. Was this the worst loss in history for the New York Giants? This was one of the biggest embarrassments I've seen in a long time. A 40-0 rout by them boys, blocked kick touchdown, pick 6 TD. Daniel Jones looked like Dan Orlovsky out there. I was waiting the whole time at one point for a Mark Sanchez-style butt fumble. The Dallas defense looked almost as terrifying as San Francisco, and Tony Pollard, my fantasy lock for 2023, looked fantastic in limited snaps. Last but not least, we got to talk about Monday Night Football, and that did not start out great for Jets fans, maybe not for football fans. And because Rodgers tormented me for years personally as a Lions fan, most notably on that Hail Mary, I haven't ever really been a fan of his, but you never wish for this type of a scenario. Obviously a storybook ending for the Hard Knocks hero, Xavier Gipson. Josh Allen, terrible game. One of the worst of his career, maybe the worst. 3 interceptions, all of which were him trying to force things. 2 fumbles, 1 loss, 5 sacks. The Jets were really smart about how they pressured, and when they did, Allen made mistakes. So this win for the Jets felt a little bit reminiscent of those Bears teams from the late 2000s where they just did a little bit of everything to get it done. Breece Hall looked explosive coming back from injury. Garrett Wilson made a ridiculous circus catch in the end zone where Zach Wilson honestly looked like he was trying to throw it to the other team. But can Zach Wilson help carry the Jets to the Super Bowl like many expected, wearing those green and white jerseys? So that pretty much does it. Do you have any overreactions from all of this in week 1? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, do me a huge favor. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, share it with a friend who might be interested. And thanks so much for watching. Happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.